Welcome to this explainer. Have you ever actually dreamt of just sprouting wings, like X-Men's Warren Worthington III, and shooting straight into the sky? I mean, it's pretty much one of the oldest human fantasies out there, right? Usually it's reserved for comic books or sci-fi movies. But there's this fascinating study that dropped in the journal Cell Reports back on May 7th, 2026, and it asks a pretty wild question. What if we could actually train our brains to fly? So let's dive right into this and see how virtual reality might literally be rewiring the physical human brain. It turns out, this exact dream of flight is what inspired the whole research project we're looking at today. Peking University cognitive neuroscientist Yan Xiaobi has apparently long dreamed of flying on her own. She theorized that having wings wouldn't just be some neat party trick. As she put it, your whole world would become different. So, over coffee, she shared this wish with a colleague who happens to run a motor control lab. And together, they basically set out to see if VR could turn this sci-fi fiction into a lived biological experience. They essentially wanted to bridge that gap between imagination and biology. The core question was, could everyday people actually learn to fly with wings in a VR setup? But more importantly, and honestly, this is where the science gets truly groundbreaking. They wanted to measure exactly how the participants' physical brains would change in response to adopting a totally alien virtual appendage. Okay, Section 1, the virtual aviary, learning to fly in VR. To test this whole idea, the team obviously had to create a custom virtual space. So let's take a look at the week-long training program designed by neuroscientist Yi-Young Kai, which was specifically built to map normal human arm movements to the mechanics of bird-like flight. To kick things off, 25 participants were brought into the lab, and the setup used to trick their brains was just fascinating. They geared everyone up with high-end VR headsets and motion tracking equipment. But the real magic happened when they stood in front of a virtual mirror. Because instead of seeing their normal human reflection, they saw themselves possessing these huge, rust-colored feathered wings. Now, the mechanics here were relatively simple but incredibly immersive. It's all about how the physical motion translated to the digital world. First, participants would look in that virtual mirror. Then, whenever they rotated their wrists and eventually flapped their arms, their massive virtual wings would move in real time. It created this immediate, seamless feedback loop between their real human muscles and their virtual feathers. Of course, just looking at yourself in a mirror isn't quite enough to rewire a brain. The training was intense. These participants had to actively use their new appendages to complete demanding physical tasks. We're talking frantically flapping away falling air balls to protect themselves, which, let's be real, sounds like a serious workout. Maintaining their balance to stay airborne over terrifyingly steep virtual cliffs, and even precisely steering their winged bodies right through mid-air rings. Now, as Beijing Normal University neuroscientist Ziyi Shuang pointed out, the learning curve definitely varied. Some participants practically took off on their very first try, while others, well, they were a bit clumsier and needed maybe 3 or 4 sessions to really get the hang of it. But over the course of the week, all 25 participants gradually mastered the ability to fly. And honestly, this mastery is exactly what set the stage for the absolute most shocking part of the study. Section 2, the plastic brain visual cortex transformation. So they learned how to play a VR game, right? Well, actually, it goes way deeper than that. Let's slow down for a second and look at what was physically happening inside the participants' heads, because the biological discovery here is absolutely staggering. To really grasp the results of this experiment, we first need to quickly define neuroplasticity. Basically, this is a measure of how flexible our brains are. It's our mind's incredible ability to adapt, reorganize, and actually rewire itself physically based on new experiences. It's the exact same mechanism we use to pick up a new language or, say, recover from a brain injury. We also need to talk about a specific brain region called the visual cortex. For this particular study, the researchers zoomed in on the part of the visual cortex that lights up when we see our own arms, legs, or, other physical body parts. It's basically the brain's internal system for recognizing, hey, that's me, that's my body. And that brilliantly illustrates what the researchers actually found when they scanned the participants' brains. Before the VR training, if you showed these folks pictures of wings, their visual cortex didn't react the way it would to a human body part, obviously. But after just 1 week of virtual flight training, a profound transformation occurred. Their visual cortex began responding to pictures of wings with the exact same signature activity it normally reserves for human upper limbs. No way, right?
I mean, let that sink in for just a second because it is wild. The participants' brains literally began treating pictures of wings in the exact same way they responded to normal human arms. Just by actively using them in a virtual space, the human brain effectively adopted these completely unhuman, rust-colored wings as real biological body parts.
Section 3. Redefining Reality. The Future of Human Enhancement. Because this isn't just about some fun flight simulator anymore. This incredible discovery proves that the boundaries of our brain's plasticity are far broader and way more flexible than scientists previously thought possible.
So let's look at what this means for the future of humanity. As cognitive neuroscientist Jane Espel points out, if we can wire our brains to accept wings, which is something no human has ever genetically possessed, then the door is wide open for other kinds of radical limb enhancements. We're talking about cybernetics, maybe extra robotic arms for surgeons, or totally new physical forms in digital spaces. Researcher Kunlun Wei also notes that this study proves VR goes way beyond just being a cool visual simulation. VR has the very real power to transform the abstract idea of flight into a visceral, firsthand biological experience. It literally allows our nervous system to adapt to new technologies, and it absolutely opens the door to creating and experiencing entirely new artificial senses that we just don't naturally possess.
With virtual and augmented reality technologies advancing at an absolute breakneck pace, the scientific community is incredibly eager to answer this next question. If just 1 week of flapping virtual wings changes the visual cortex, what happens when we spend hours every single day in virtual spaces? For work, socializing, or gaming? How will that extended time permanently reshape us?
So I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought to chew on. As our technology continues to completely blur the line between the digital world and our physical biology, what other impossible realities will our brains soon accept as perfectly normal? If you can grow wings in your mind today, who knows what you'll be tomorrow? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning reality.